Thank you very much indeed. John, thank you very much for inviting me to come and talk. I thought I'd put my red jumper on to make you feel festive. Just think of me as an early Father Christmas. But I'm very conscious that all of you in this room know far more than I know about chess and education. And so I feel something of a fraud standing in front of you. And it reminds me of when I was introduced into the House of Lords, when I became Minister of State for Trade and Investment about 3 years ago. And John Gardner, who was one of my sponsors when I went in, said to me, "Mark, remember, when you stand at the dispatch box answering questions, there will be many people in the chamber who know far more than you know about international trade." He said, "In fact, I can readily think of 5 people sitting here who did your job before you." And so what I thought I would try to do this morning is give you a very personal view of why I wrote a book called The Foolish King, and why I built a chess app, an online site which is now played by, questions quickly, which is now played by about 28,000 kids around the world. And I wrote the book was published about 3 years ago, and 15,000 copies of the book is sold. So why did I do that? How did I get to doing that? Well, I don't come from a chess playing family. I come from Crewe in Cheshire. My parents didn't really play games, certainly didn't play chess. They had a friend who was a headmaster called Mr. Quine, and they used to pack me and my brother off to have tea with him, and he taught us how to play chess in his rather stuffy study. My brother was much better at chess than me, which is very frustrating because he was 3 years younger than me. But nonetheless, we used to play chess. We had a chess club at Crewe Grammar School for Boys, which I went to. And so I played lots of chess competitively, and I would rank myself as below average. But I loved playing. And after school, I went to university. I read archaeology and ancient history, and then I joined the John Lewis Partnership, and I had a long career in the John Lewis Partnership. And latterly, I ran Waitrose supermarkets and was deputy chairman of John Lewis. And it was during that time, probably about 10 years ago now, maybe a little longer, 15 years ago, that I decided that I would teach my eldest daughter, Holly, and my younger daughter, Lily, how to play chess. And there are 3 reasons why I taught them how to play chess, which for me go to the heart of why chess is so important, particularly the last of the 3. The first one is that you learn in chess, or 99.9999 people learn in chess, that there is always somebody better than you. And you learn to lose, and you learn to win occasionally, and you learn to be gracious and shake people's hands and look them in the eye, whether you win or lose. And I think that's a great life lesson. In addition to that, you analyse. You analyse where you did well, and you analyse where you did badly. And you self-analyse. And I think that now that is a really important skill that this next generation learn. The world, as you all know, is changing at a rate of knots around us. Technology is going to transform the workplace. I think a lot of the things that we're seeing with Brexit and in France at the moment and in America and the political disruption are all based on the fact that the world is changing at a rate of knots that people are finding very hard to deal with. Children today in school, I suspect, will work into their 70s, they will work into their 80s. I'm on a committee in the House of Lords that looks at intergenerational fairness. And there is no doubt that Generation Z now have a less good deal than my generation. And the world's going to change even more. And so giving them the skills to understand what's going on around them, I think is hugely important, to analyse that and to take some control for themselves. The second reason that I taught my daughters chess, in addition to learning how to win and lose and analyse what's going on and how to improve, is that you need a plan. There's no point walking up to a chessboard and moving any piece randomly. You have to think about what you're going to do. And you need to be proactive in thinking about what you do. But in my experience, most people in life don't think about that. They really don't have a plan. They go into work, they go home. And so I was very keen that they thought about what they wanted to do. Now, I have come to the conclusion, rather like the Dalai Lama, that the purpose of life is the pursuit of happiness and to try and stop suffering and harm. But principally, it's about the pursuit of happiness. And if you are going to pursue happiness, you need to think about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. You need to measure it and you need to have a plan. So I wanted them to be proactive in their life plan. The third reason I did it, and for me, the most important thing about the game of chess and 8 other games in the world, is that it's an abstract strategy game. The first 2 things I said, winning and losing, and having a plan, you could apply to almost any sport and almost any game. But the genius of chess is that everything changes. You start with a plan, as you all know, and based on the moves of your opponent, you change your plan. When I ran Waitrose supermarkets, we had a very clear plan about what we wanted to achieve commercially. Believe it or not, when I was in the British government, we had a very clear plan about what we wanted to do with Brexit. But you're not playing on your own. You're playing against people on the other side who have their own ambitions. They want to win. And so in a supermarket context, on a daily basis, your customers change, your products change, your suppliers change, the market changes. Everything's changing constantly. And the brilliant thing about the game of chess is that it is not a game of luck. It is a game where you respond to what the other person is doing. And I think in the world going forward, in the world that our children are going to see, that ability to adapt, coupled with that ability to self-analyse, coupled with that ability to plan, are absolutely key life skills. For me, chess was never about trying to make them cleverer, although I think on one level it probably does. It was about learning those skills. The other thing that I was conscious of is that, and I was really interested in the gender analysis that you were giving. When I talked to my daughters about learning to play chess, they said to me, it's a game for boys. And I said, why is it a game for boys? They said, well, it's about war and battle and knights and castles and bishops and kings. And so I had that thought ringing in the back of my mind. But I was determined that chess was the game that I wanted to teach them. And so I was sitting in the garden in our home one summer, 15 odd years ago, with Holly, and we had a board laid out in the garden, and I was explaining to her how the pieces moved. And for some reason, she just didn't take to it. The knights, and she just wasn't taken to it. And so at that moment in time, as luck would have it, a butterfly flew past. And so I said to her, this isn't a knight, it's a butterfly. And butterflies hop from flower to flower. And that's what knights do, they hop. And then the bishops, they're like wriggly worms. They don't go forward, they move sideways. And the pawns, they're like ants and bees. They only move forward. You don't walk backwards if you're an ant. You can't fly backwards if you're a bee. So they only go forward. And so bit by bit, I started to make up a story for her about how the pieces were in fact insects in the garden, so that she could help remember how they moved. And then I began to explain to her, as I elaborated my own story over the years, that it was all about a game between the insects, and they had this game every morning instead of going to war with each other and fighting each other, and every day it was to make them better at their task. So aerating the soil if they were worms, or pollinating the flowers if they were butterflies. And I did nothing with this story. I wrote it down on a couple of sides of paper so that when Holly had grown up a bit and a younger sister grew into it, I could use the same story to explain the game to her sister. And then when I started at Waitrose, I was asked to write a couple of food books. I wrote one about picnicking, called The Great British Picnic Guide, and it did reasonably well. And so the publisher kept phoning me up saying, will you write more food books? And I said, look, I really don't have time. And they wanted me to write a book about royal food and all sorts of things. I said, I really, really don't have time. So they said, well, have you got anything else? So I sent them through the 3 scribbled pages I'd written, and they saw it, Ebury Random House, and they said, we think this is quite good, but we don't really do children's books. We'll pass it to a man who does. And so they sent it to a chap called David Fickling. And David Fickling is a wonderful children's publisher. He's published Jackie Wilson and Philip Pullman. So he very, very kindly said to me that he thought there was something in it, but it needed a lot of work. 35 rewrites, and 8 years later, the book was finally published, which I was really, really proud about. And at the start, there's a dedication to Holly. Once I'd done that, I wanted to try and get children playing, and so I built the app, which is based on the story, and it's available in Android and iOS, and online. And I try to make it fun, so that when a piece takes another piece, it disappears into a green mush, and it goes, which children find very funny. And so I was really keen to try and make the game accessible and fun. And as I said, I'm delighted to say that 15,000 copies of the book have gone. They're sold in Australia and New Zealand, as well as in the UK. I'm very pleased to say that lots and lots of children are playing the game around the world. My next step is to think about the other abstract strategy games, and there are 8 more. There's drafts, an international drafts, as you know, which is more complicated than checkers. There's a medieval game in Europe called Fox and Geese. There's an Italian game called Reverse, which Mattel have called Othello. There's an African game called Mancala, and there are many versions of it in Africa. There's a North American game called Racing Snakes. There's an Indonesian game called Sukara. And as far as I'm aware, oh no, there's Nine Men's Merrill, which is Roman, ancient Roman game. And as far as I'm aware, they're all the games in the world that are abstract strategy games, that after the first move, anything can effectively happen, and you have to respond to that move. And I want to publish books on all of those, and I want to make apps and games on all of those. And the reason that I want to do it is whatever route it takes, I'd love kids to spend some time, rather than on shoot-up games or whatever, just spending some time on something that makes them, hopefully in a fun and educational way, think about winning and losing, and that's okay, either option is fine, thinking about the ability to self-analyse, thinking about planning ahead, and lastly, thinking about that ability to adapt to the circumstances that you find yourself in. So that's my story. I've been asked outside questions about politics and politicians and chess, and I'm happy to take any questions you have on those. But I just wanted to tell you my very simple story. It wasn't based on doing anything grand. It wasn't based on conquering the world. It was based on helping my 2 daughters learn how to play a fantastic game, and as a consequence of that, to become, hopefully, more prepared for the life that was ahead of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a beautiful story. I mean, you don't know what happens with those stories you tell your children, but this is it's a really beautiful story. 15,000 copies sold?
15,000.
Yeah, no, but it's quite a lot.
It's done okay.
Yes, I know many chess book writers who would be very happy to sell 15,000 copies of their books. You say you talk about all these other games. I don't know if I heard of them, but do you mean that these games are as important in those countries as chess is in Britain? So and that is the reason, because I mean chess is, I want to talk about chess here, but chess is a global game. And you don't think it works in those countries?
No, I think chess is a global game.
Yeah.
I want more children to play chess. But I want them to see that there are other games as well that have the same attribute, particularly the abstract strategy part. So real games of skill, not games of luck. So as I say, Africa, Mancala, Racing Snakes in North America, Reverse, etc. Go in China, I forgot Go in China. So all of these games, I want to try and develop them in a way with a story and an app that allows children to access them at a younger age. And I'd love them to play them all, but no, I'm not doing those games because I don't think chess will work in Africa or clearly it works in China. But it's more that I think there's a suite of games that children can play.
Okay. Have you seen, I mean, you're a businessman and you're a politician also. Have you seen chess in that capacity, in a way that chess player, had you been working with chess player, chess skills could be used in other areas?
Well, I always kept a chess set in my office when I was in my previous business running Waitrose and John Lewis. And when people came in for meetings, I'd play chess against them when we were talking.
All right. And sometimes you lost on purpose just to get the contract or something?
No, I don't think I've ever purposely lost. I'm just not very good. No, it's this. So I think one of the things, both in politics, very sadly, but also in business, is that people have a preset idea and plan, and they're not flexible about understanding that the person opposite them has a plan and that they need to adapt. So the lesson, both in my time running Waitrose and my time in the government as well, was about trying to get people to understand, okay, we've got our plan, we know what we want, what do they want? And what are they going to do when we ask this? And so all the things chess players take for granted, I don't think are normal in the business world and or in the political world, and people get very frustrated when their ideology won't work. That ability to rethink, to compromise, I think is sadly lacking. There was a question about more women in politics. I think politics would be better if there was more women. I think that ability to think more calmly about the bigger picture tends to be a skill I'd see more in women. I mean, I now chair a tech company, which is a female CEO. In fact, 4 of the top 5 people in the company are women. And to see the way in which they teamwork and build is far less adversarial than I see in male colleagues who are continually trying to beat each other, rather than thinking about, well, what does this person want?
It's competitiveness in another sense.
About whether it's nature or nurture, but my experience is that
if it doesn't really matter when you already have it, it's like that. The researcher, do you know about this skill he's talking about? Are there any studies on if the chess player's skills that he's talking about does it work? Is it a connection? Is it causality? Yeah. Maybe you can. Maybe it's just you were not prepared for that, but maybe you can elaborate on that later, because I mean sometimes you see stuff and you can see it's probably because of the chess skills that they are being able to think ahead or having a plan or whatever.
It must help. I'm sure everybody in the room agrees it must help.
In this room, no problem.
Yeah. But I think if you just take 1 minute to explain to somebody what you have to do to be good at chess, in terms of thinking ahead, having a plan, reacting, and then equating it to life skills. And all those times in life you have to do those things. Yeah. For me, it was the most obvious thing to want to teach my daughters. And throughout my business career, it was always very, very important for me, not just to say, we're going to do this, but to think about, so what's the response going to be, and how do you respond to the response? Social media is a great thing. People on social media now just whack up anything. And it's easy to do if you're a politician and if you're a business person. I would recommend that nobody tweets when they've had a drink. Nobody tweets after 8 o'clock. And nobody tweets without reading it at least 5 times before it goes. Because it's that, it's that.
I know some high politicians that is not following your rules.
I know a lot of people that aren't. But if you're a chess player, you will know you do not take your hand off that piece until you are 100% sure. But then just say to people, do you do that in life?
Okay, any questions for Mark? Some here. Start here.
You said I make a game. Do you have programming skills?
No. No. I said, you're all a million times better than me. I just had an idea that I wanted to teach my daughter something in a fun and accessible way. It's that simple an idea. I'm driven by trying to make people happy. My business is called Engaging Works. It's about measuring happiness at work. And it's a survey that people do, and they can find out how they can be happy at work. And I did that because, again, I want my daughters to understand how happy they are, and if they're not as happy as they could be, to do something about it. So many people just sit back and let circumstance roll over them. You don't do that at chess. You have to have a plan. You have to think ahead if you're going to be good at it. So no, I'm not a programmer.
Do you think we would have had a better negotiated Brexit deal if everybody in government had been a chess player?
Well, sadly, I think they are all chess players, but they're not all playing the same game. So if you think about Brexit, the Labour Party wants an election. So their game isn't about a Brexit deal. It's about what do we have to do to create the circumstances for an election. There are some people that want to be leader of the Conservative Party in the government. They're not playing a game about Brexit. They're playing a game about what do I have to do to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. The Liberal Party know that 48% of people voted to remain, and that they'll do better at the next election than they did at the last if they can persuade those people that they're in their camp and voting for them. So they are great chess players, but they're not playing the same game. They're all playing different games, which helps you to understand why you get all the noise that you continually get.
Chess player playing different games. That was a good answer. More questions for Mark?
A lot of the discussion we had over the last 2 days about the benefits of chess has spoken specifically about mathematics and other of these sort of, I guess, popular measurable outcomes. But you only really focused on abstract thinking, which I found really interesting because this ability to adapt to planning, we typically see that as a more advanced chess skill. If one wants to become a chess player, it's trained a bit later, this idea of prophylactic thinking and all this sort of stuff. Do you think that it might be worth, for those who use chess as an educational tool in the schools, to actually be focusing that a bit earlier than one might do if you wanted to train someone to become a professional chess player, because it's more useful?
Yeah, I think that for the world our children's going into, as I said, it's going to change so quickly. I mean, it's now common that you change your job every 2-3 years. My generation would never think of doing that. And you're going to need to learn new skills. So that ability to start with a plan and say, I'm going to start by being a chess person, and then have the ability to adapt and say, I'm going to become an economist, and then perhaps I'm going to be a politician, David. But that's part of the skill that you learn in chess. It's that ability to be able to adapt your thinking based on what's happening in the world around you. You know, having a plan that says, my plan for life is to be happy. How am I going to do that? And having that ability to be rational in your debates. I mean, I know that there's a lot of competitiveness in the chess world, but, you know, people do, by and large, treat each other with great respect. And you always know there's always another game. And hopefully you learn from every game. So for me, those life skills are vital. I mean, chess is great for teaching you maths and geometry, a whole host of things. You know, you learn history from chess, etc. But for me, it was always about the life skills that you learn from it. And chess is one of the, well, as I said, there's only 8 other games I know of which are genuinely abstract strategy. For every other game, it's luck. I don't want to teach kids it's about luck. You know, there is a big dollop of luck, of course there is, but it isn't about luck. It's about adapting and being ahead and planning, not waiting for things that are so bad you decide you're going to change something, but actually saying, this isn't working, I'm going to change my approach.
All right, Mark, then thank you very much.
Thank you.
So.